Welcome to my 14-day SAT prep series. Today is day 9 and 14, and today we're going to cover things for the writing section as well as the reading section. So for the writing section today, what we're going to do is I'm going to play about 30 minutes of SAT writing tips and tricks. So these are going to be tips and tricks designed to help you move through the writing section more efficiently. They're going to show you what I look for on the SAT writing section as someone who has scored perfectly on it on back-to-back SATs. So you'll get an inside look at the setups and the patterns and the tricks that I use in order to be very, very efficient on the writing section. So after 30 minutes of that, we're going to get into some reading section pacing. So as you know, we've done pacing walkthroughs for the math no calculator section, the math with calculator section, and the SAT writing section. The only section we haven't done is the reading section. Now I'm not going to take a whole 65 minutes since that would take the whole lesson today to do the reading section pacing walkthrough, but what I will do is I'll take about 30 minutes to do a pacing walkthrough through 3 different passages. Okay, so what that's going to boil down to is going to boil down to about 10 minutes total per passage, which, as you see in my recommended pacing strategy, we see that that is well in our range of 9 to 11 minutes per passage, which obviously would leave us with 20 to 10 minutes left at the end to check questions that we skipped or were unsure of. So I put the recommended pacing strategy right here so that you could read through it and kind of refresh your memory on it, because we hadn't talked about it since SAT day 7. So I'll be using this recommended pacing strategy for the reading section when I go through it. So you'll see me read through my passages in less than 4 minutes. It'll probably be between 3 to 3.5 minutes. You'll see me answer all the questions in one passage in anywhere from 9 to 11 minutes on each of those 3 passages. You'll see me do the passages. In this case, I won't be doing them in the order that's easiest to me or to you, just because obviously that's subjective to everyone. So I just did them in the order that they came. Then after that, I'm not going to skip any questions because I won't need to. So you don't have to worry about that. That's not really going to be applicable. But you can still know that for when you take the SAT in case you do need to. And then after that, I won't be going through at the end when I have extra time, just because, like I said, I got to keep this video to right around an hour. But once I would finish, I would end up having probably right around 20 minutes left, maybe 15 minutes left to go ahead and do things. The order of things that I would do then is the first priority, obviously, if you're taking the SAT, should be any questions you haven't answered yet that you skipped or were unsure of. That's the first thing you're going to want to do. After that, if the SAT is paper pencil, you're going to want to be checking your bubble sheet, making sure that it matches your booklet. That should only take you about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. And then after that, like I said, you already went to your skipped questions at that point, but if there were any left and you started checking your bubble sheet and you still had a couple left, go do those. Go to any unsure answers. Once that's done, what you're going to want to do is you're going to check as many questions as you can. Okay, so just go through, check as many questions as you can at that point. So obviously you won't see me be doing that because, like I said, got to keep this video to right around an hour. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get into the writing section tips and tricks. Once we're done with those, I'll probably have a brief intermission of right around a minute where I explain some things, and then we'll get started with the reading section pacing. So with that, let's get started with the writing section tips and tricks. Alright, so today I've got 2 SAT writing tips for you, kind of wrapped into one video. The first SAT writing tip is really just a grammar rule that you have to follow, and the second one is really a specific tip to the SAT writing section. So let's just go ahead and quick knock out the first tip. So we've got, when Professor Zeynep Tan at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology compared 2 chains of warehouse club stores, there has to be a comma after here. How do I know that? Well, I know that because this is an introductory dependent clause. So we have a dependent clause right at the beginning of our sentence. If we have a dependent clause beginning our sentence, what we know is we have to have a comma after the last part of that dependent clause. Now the last part of that dependent clause is the word stores, therefore our answer for 37 has to be B, because we need a comma after the last part of our dependent clause. Now one thing that you can use to kind of tell when you have an introductory dependent clause like this, keep in mind the word introductory just means it's at the start of your sentence, is if you have a subordinating conjunction. In this case, when is a subordinating conjunction. You can look up a list of subordinating conjunctions on Google and take a look at those to familiarize yourself with them. I would recommend doing that after watching this video. So you have, when Professor Zeynep Tan at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology compared 2 chains of warehouse club stores. That's my introductory dependent clause. After that, I must have a comma. Okay, so that's your first tip. That's really just a grammar rule though. Now here we get into our second tip. Now this tip is really the one that, in my opinion, is just something that is a really, really good thing that you need to know, and it's a good strategy, and I really want to take some time and explain it here. So when we have, he's comparing 2 chains of warehouse club stores, one with better average pay and benefits, and another with lower employee wages, she found that the average number, okay, and I'm going to put this in green because this is what I want to focus on. She found that the average number of sales per employee at the higher wage club was double, and then I have a subject right here. Okay, I'm going to put my subject, I'm going to draw that in black so you can see where my arrow is pointing. Okay, see right here, this is my subject. Now keep in mind that this is at the lower wage club store. So I'm comparing I'm comparing what you saw up here, the average number at the higher wage club store, to what at the lower wage club store. Now the reason I went slow there is so that you could kind of see this. Okay, notice how I'm comparing two different things. I'm comparing that higher wage club store, right? I'm comparing the average number of sales per employee at the higher club store, higher wage club store, to something at the lower wage club store. Well, that something has to be the number. Okay, the answer there has to be C. Why can't it be the employees? I know that we see employee right here, but why can't we compare the employees? Well, we can't compare employees because of sales per employee is a prepositional phrase describing this average number. Okay, so if we have a prepositional phrase like that, we got to keep in mind we're not comparing what's in the prepositional phrase, we're comparing the subject. The subject is the average number. Okay, she found that the average number of sales per employee at the higher wage club was double the number at the lower wage club. It's not double the employees. It's not double the employees. It is double the number. Okay, so we have to make sure we're comparing our subjects correctly. It's not double the one, so B is wrong. It's not double the employees, and we can't just delete it because we have to compare it to something else. In this case, we're comparing numbers, right? The average number, and then of sales per employee, that's a prepositional phrase, so we ignore it. Okay, our subject is the average number. Therefore, we need to compare the number to the other number. So the average number, compare it to the number at the lower wage club store. So right there, the big tip there is understanding that you have to compare two of the same subjects, right? So if you're asked a comparison question, make sure you're comparing the same things. If you're comparing one number, you must be comparing it to another number. You can't compare a number from a given set of data to an employee, right, of another set of data. If you have a lower wage club store and a higher wage club store, and you're comparing a number at one, you must be comparing it to a number at the other. You can't switch that and do a different subject. So that's the tip there. Today I have two SAT writing tips for you. So the first SAT writing tip I have deals with connecting a dependent clause to an independent clause in order to avoid unnecessary repetition. And the next SAT writing tip I have for you deals with placing a sentence within a paragraph in order to save time and be the most efficient that you can be on the SAT writing section. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be doing questions 19 through 22 on SAT Practice Test 6. And the reason that this tip video is going to take 4 questions to do is because I want to show you something to do with pacing and being efficient. Okay, so the first thing that I see when I look at this passage here from SAT Practice Test 6 is I see I have a 1 there. Now anytime that I see I have a 1 at the beginning of a paragraph, I know I'm going to be dealing with placing a sentence. So I'm going to go down and find the sentence I have to place. I see in this case it is sentence 5. So I have to place sentence 5. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to read sentence 5 before I start reading my paragraph. So I see sentence 5 is right here. I have Berlin, and then I have anytime that I have a question within that first sentence that I have to read to place it, I go ahead and answer that question as I read the sentence. So I'll go ahead and do that. So we have Berlin advocated using soil extraction, removing small amounts of soil from under the tower's north side. Okay, in this case, I see that I'm tested on being idiomatic. Okay, if you don't know what idiomatic is, it just means that you're basically writing as you would if you were talking, right? Say that I was going to tell you that Berlin advocated using soil extraction, right? Nothing is wrong with that. That sounds perfectly grammatically correct. But what if I said Berlin advocated to use soil extraction? Well, that's not idiomatic, right? The key part that makes that wrong is the part to use, okay? We wouldn't say he advocated to use soil extraction. We would say he advocated using soil extraction. So idiomatic questions, or idiom questions, if you want to call them that, they deal with pretty much how you would normally talk, right? What would you say? What prepositions would you use? What word choice would you use? Things like that. So in this case, it's really dealing with prepositions, right? And also verbs, right? So in this case, advocated is going to act as the main verb, right? And then using is going to talk about that soil extraction. Okay, so our answer for 21 there is going to be A. We wouldn't say advocated the using of soil extraction because that's really, really wordy. Okay, that's wordy. We don't want to be wordy. And then D, advocating to use soil extraction. Once again, that's also wordy. Okay, it's not concise and it's also not idiomatic. Okay, so answer choices B and C, they're both not idiomatic. They both are a little bit wordy. And then option D, there's no main verb there. Okay, and then with option A is perfectly fine. Option A is our correct answer. It's idiomatic. It functions grammatically correct, so A is our correct answer for 21. Okay, so now keep in mind I'm reading through sentence 5. I have Berlin advocated using soil extraction, removing small amounts of soil from under the tower's north side opposite its tilt to enable gravity to straighten the tower. All right, so now after I've read my sentence, what I do is I come up with what should come before and what should come after the sentence. Then as I read through my paragraph, I can place it. Okay, so what should come before this? Well, I see I talk about Berlin advocating using soil extraction. So what comes before it? Well, I should talk about Berlin before it. Okay, so I should talk about Berlin, who he is, and what kind of his expertise is before this. So before sentence 5, I want to talk about Berland. Now after sentence 5, I want to talk about this policy he's advocating, this soil extraction. So after sentence 5, I want to talk about soil extraction. Okay. So since he's advocating it here, I'd be looking for something with him now doing it. After he advocated it, it's either successful in his advocation or not successful in his advocation, but I want to talk about something with him doing soil extraction if he is successful in his advocation. So now we can read through and place that sentence as we read. Now notice how much more time that's going to save us, because if we were to read through this whole paragraph and then go back and place sentence 5, we'd have to reread it again, and this way we only have to read it once, which saves us time. So we have enter committee member John Berland. Now we have a comma. Okay, I see I have the word he is. So this is my other SAT writing tips for today. Now the first SAT writing tip is dealing with placing that sentence 5, right? Talking about how to place sentences and save time. The other one is connecting a dependent clause to an independent clause to avoid repetition. Now in this case, I say John Berland, and then I have a comma and I have the word he is. I don't want to do that because I just said who it was. So me repeating the word he, or repeating Berland as an option B, or repeating his in option C, that's all repetitive, and I don't want to be repetitive. The two main things that you want to avoid on the SAT writing section are repetition and redundancy. If you can avoid those two things, it's going to help you out a lot. So in this case, I don't want to say Berland again, and I don't want to say his again, I don't want to say he again. So options A through C are going to be wrong. What I want to do is I just want to delete that underlined portion, keep that comma there, which it has to be kept anyway since it's not underlined, and then just say a geotechnical engineer from England who saved London's clock tower, Big Ben, from collapse. Okay, that's using a dependent clause, right? That whole thing, I'll put it in blue. Right, from here all the way to collapse, that's a dependent clause that's being connected to my independent clause, which I'm going to put in green by that comma. Okay, so that's grammatically correct. That works. D would be our correct answer for 19. Okay, so that's the first SAT writing tip. So now we just keep reading to go ahead and answer where we're going to place sentence 5. Now keep in mind, what did we just talk about? Well, we just talked about John Berland. Now what did I say needed to become before sentence 5? Well, what needed to come before sentence 5 was a discussion of who John Berland is and what his expertise was. In this case, we talk about John Berland. We say he's an engineer from England who saved Big Ben from collapse. So we're talking about how he's an expert in geotechnical engineering, and his name is John Berland. So we're introducing this character who now in sentence 5 is advocating a policy of soil extraction to help save something from collapse, right? Let me see if I can scroll down, right, to help save this tower from collapse. So let's look at sentence 2 and see if that has what comes after, because we've already found what should come before it. Let's double check that by making sure what comes after then is a discussion of that soil extraction. So we have Berland began a years-long process of drilling out small amounts of soil, which is soil extraction. So therefore we know that we're going to place it after sentence 1. So sentence 5 needs to come after sentence 1, okay, because it matched what we talked about and what should come before that sentence and what should come after. Now we can go ahead and read on and solve for number 20 real quick. So we have Berland began a years-long process of drilling out small amounts of soil from under the tower that took several years to complete. Okay, I need to get rid of this whole part right here, right, that I just said, that whole underlined portion. How do I know I need to delete all of that? Well, I just said, and I'm going to put this, I'll highlight it for you. I just said that it was a years-long process. Okay, a years-long process is the same thing as taking several years to complete. Okay, so I'll highlight that as well. Since those two are the same thing and we can't get rid of a years-long process, we want to get rid of the fact that it took several years to complete, because that's just repetitive and redundant. And like I said, the two big things we want to avoid in the SAT writing section are repetition and redundancy. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of those. So our answer would be D, delete the underlined portion. So hopefully you can see how that that strategy is going to save you time, right? By going ahead and finding sentence 5 as your first step whenever you see a 1 at the start of a paragraph, what that's going to do is that's going to let you only read through that paragraph once. Now you see that this paragraph's pretty big. Imagine if you had to read through that twice because you read through the first time and then you got to question 22, realized, oh, I have to place sentence 5. Then you had to read through and find where to place it. Now by going to sentence 5 first, what you're doing is you go to sentence 5, you come up with what should come before it and what should come after, and then you're able to place your sentence as you read. So you notice when I read John Berland here up top in our first sentence and talked about how he was a geotechnical engineer, that matched with what I thought should come before sentence 5. Therefore, I knew as long as sentence 2 matched what I thought should come after, I could go ahead and place it after sentence 1, which I ultimately did. So by doing that, it saved me time because I only had to read through one time in that paragraph. Okay, now our other big tip there was dealing up here with connecting our dependent clause to our independent clause with a comma in order to avoid that unnecessary repetition of he is or Berland or his being, since we just said our subject John Berland and we don't want to repeat our subject twice. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Today I have an SAT writing and language tip that I want to share with you. So anytime that I see that I have one word or two words or a series of words at the beginning of a sentence followed by a comma on the SAT writing section, as I do in question 31, what I'm going to look to do is make sure that I'm connecting or transitioning from my previous sentence, which I'm going to underline in blue. It says Texas researchers found that PAs lend cost-efficient, widely appreciated services in underserved areas. And then with my following sentence. Okay, so I want to connect my previous sentence to my following sentence, which says rural-based PAs often provide a broader spectrum of such services than do their urban and suburban counterparts, possibly as a consequence of the limited pool of rural-based physicians. So whenever I see that I have one word, two words, three words, four words, or a series of words at the beginning of my sentence followed by a comma, I know that what it's looking to test me on the SAT writing section is my ability to transition between my previous my previous sentence into my new sentence, or link my previous sentence to my new sentences. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. So anytime that I have one word, two words, three words followed by a comma at the beginning of a sentence, I am looking to either, number one, transition from my previous sentence to my current sentence. So from previous sentence to current sentence, or, so we got that, or number two, link. And that can be and or, right? They can do both of these things at the same time. If you have the correct transition word, it can do both of them. And link that previous sentence to my current sentence. So link that previous sentence to my current sentence. So those are the two things that I'm looking to do. If I see that I have something like in addition followed by a comma, or however followed by a comma, or anything like that, I want to link that previous sentence to my current sentence, or transition from that previous sentence to my current sentence. Okay, so that's the big tip that I have here for you today. So I want to quick run through that with question 31 because I think it provides a good example of what to look for. So if I read that sentence before it, it says a recent review of the scholarly literature by Texas researchers found that PAs lend cost-efficient, widely appreciated services in underserved areas. Okay, so that's a positive thing that physician assistants do. They're lending cost-efficient and widely appreciated services in underserved areas. So that's a positive thing. So now I'm going to look at my next sentence. I see that it says rural-based PAs often provide a broader spectrum of such services. Okay, providing a broader spectrum of services is a positive thing than do their urban and suburban counterparts, possibly as a consequence of the limited pool of rural-based physicians. So that's also talking about a positive thing that these rural-based physician assistants are doing. Okay, so we're talking about two things that physician assistants are doing well. So if we're talking about two positives, then that's in addition, right? Those two things aren't contrasting each other, they are adding on to each other. So our correct answer for 31 would be A. Now, keep in mind, the word thus, that would indicate a causal relationship. Now, what came in that previous sentence is not causing what occurs in the next sentence. Now, because what came in the previous sentence is not causing what comes in the next sentence, I can't use the word thus, or the word therefore, or the word consequently, or as a result, because all of those would indicate a causal relationship. Now, what about despite this? Well, what came in my previous sentence and what came in my next sentence, right? It's not despite the current sentence, the sentence in green. The sentence in green does not occur despite what the sentence in blue said. So C would be incorrect because that's not linking my two sentences together with a correct transition or correct linking word or linking phrase. Now, what about on the other hand? Well, on the other hand, that's indicating some sort of contrast or some sort of withdraw from one thing to the next, right? And in this case, there's no contrast or no withdrawal. All that it is something that is in addition to the other. So this big tip right here for the SAT writing section is anytime that you see at the beginning of a sentence you have one word, two words, three words underlined followed by a comma, you need to understand that you're being tested to transition from that previous sentence to the current sentence and or link that previous sentence's ideas to that current sentence's ideas. So that's one big thing that you want to know for that SAT writing and language section. And once you identify that, what you want to do is make sure you understand the main idea of that previous sentence and how it relates to that next sentence. Sometimes it'll be something that's in addition to something else. Sometimes it will be a contrast, and if it's a contrast, you want to use something like however or on the other hand, right? Sometimes it'll be something that is a causal relationship. Something in a previous sentence is causing the thing that happens in that current sentence. In that case, you want to use something like consequently, as a result, thus, therefore, something like that. Sometimes the previous sentence will be something that was negative, and then that next sentence will be something that was positive, and it was in spite of what happened before. In that case, you want to use something like despite this or in spite of as your transition. So understand transition words, understand what transition words mean. Another thing I do want to add on, for in addition, anytime you have two ideas that are adding to each other, let's say that you don't have in addition as an option, you don't have additionally as an option. Another two that could work there would be furthermore and moreover. So those are two other words that you should know as well. So hopefully that was helpful in understanding how to transition between sentences and how to look and identify that question type. So you'll be able to identify it by that underlining of those first two or one word at the beginning of a sentence followed by a comma is how you can identify that type of question. So hopefully that was helpful. Today I have an SAT writing tip I'd like to share with you. On the SAT, you will be tested on your ability to maintain an academic tone and avoid using casual words or slang words in an academic type essay. So what I want to do is I want to go through two questions on SAT Practice Test 6 to illustrate this idea and this tip/trick that I have for you. So when dealing with words such as in 24 and in question 25, what I want to do is I want to show you the process and the thought process that I would use to find the correct answer. So let's go ahead and run through 24 real quick. So while the pressures of an aging population, insurance reforms, and health epidemics have increased demand for care, the supply of physicians is not expected to keep pace. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. That sounds really good, and A will be my correct answer, but I want to show you why B through D are wrong to kind of illustrate my point on using casual words and slang in the SAT writing section. So when I have a word like this, in this example it's two words, it's keep pace, and it's underlined either in the middle of my sentence or at the end of my sentence, and then I look at my other options, for example A through D, and I see that they're different words, right? They're not just different endings, so it's not pace versus paced or pacing, but they all have different endings, or different root words, I'm sorry, not different endings, they all have different root words, okay? They have maintain the tempo, get in line, move along. Since those are all different root words and have different meanings, what I know I'm looking to do there is I'm looking to do a couple things. I want to maintain my academic tone because on the SAT writing section, most passages, in my opinion, will have an academic tone. You want to maintain that. So you don't want to sound like you're talking to your friend over text. Okay, you want to maintain an academic tone and you want to avoid, first of all, let me just put maintain up here. You want to maintain an academic tone, and then you also want to avoid slang and casual words. Slang and casual words. Okay, slang and casual words, they are a no-go for the SAT writing section. You do not want to use them. Okay, so for example, if I look at question 24, me saying that the supply of physicians is not expected to keep pace with this increased demand for care, right? I'll put that in blue. The increased demand for care, we are not expected to have the supply of physicians keep pace with that. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay, that's idiomatic. And that's the other thing that I want to put down here is you're also looking for it to be idiomatic. If you don't know what idiomatic means, it just means that it's something that we would say it's grammatically correct, right? It's just something that doesn't sound awkward when we say it. It just sounds normal, right? It doesn't sound awkward. There's no awkward pauses when we say it or anything like that. Okay, so I'm looking to really do three things in a case where I have a word or two words underlined mid-sentence or the end of the sentence, and I have all different root words in my answer choices. I'm looking to make sure I'm maintaining an academic tone. I want to make sure I avoid slang and casual words, and I want to make sure it's also idiomatic. Okay, so in this case, keep pace makes perfect sense. I wouldn't say maintain the tempo because no tempo is described, right? And we were talking about two things, matching the increase of demand with the increase in the supply of physicians, which in this case is not present. Therefore, it's not expected to keep pace. We wouldn't say maintain the tempo. That's not idiomatic there. Now, as far as get in line and move along, those two are way, way, way too casual. Okay, we would not say move along in an academic essay. That does not maintain an academic tone. It's way too casual, way too much like slang. Same thing with get in line. Way too casual, way too much like slang. So SAT writing section, make sure you avoid using slang and casual words. You want to make sure you maintain an academic tone and that you're also idiomatic. So let's go take a look at question 25 because it's also testing your ability to maintain an academic tone, avoid slang and casual words, and also for number 25, it's not really testing your ability to be idiomatic. That one is just testing your ability to maintain an academic tone and avoid slang and casual words. So number 25 is not testing your ability to find something that's idiomatic. That was just one of the answer choices for question 24 that was testing your ability to be idiomatic. But question 25, we have, because a traditionalist response to the crisis, okay, we're talking about the crisis of there being an increased demand for physicians but a lower supply. We have amping up medical college enrollments and expanding physician training programs is too slow and costly to address the near-term problem. Alternatives are being explored. Okay, now we wouldn't say amping up medical college enrollments in an academic essay like this. Okay, amping up is too casual. That's too casual. Okay, and I'm going to put that in green so you can kind of see that it's different from what I'm saying in 24. Okay, it's too casual. Answer choice A, it's too casual. We wouldn't say amping up medical college enrollments if we're writing an academic essay. Now, what about revving up? Once again, that's slang. Okay, we wouldn't say revving up. It's slang and it's too casual. Okay, we don't want to be casual and we don't want to do slang when we're talking about the SAT writing section. We want to be maintaining an academic tone, and we want to be really just making sure we're maintaining that academic tone, avoiding slang and casual words. So now let's take a look at options B and C. Okay, I want to show you why C is wrong. Okay, C, the word arousing, we wouldn't say because of traditional response to the crisis, arousing medical college enrollments, because that is just not even really related, right? It's not a correct use of the word arousing. It's just not, it also doesn't fit with an academic tone. So it doesn't have an academic tone. It's also kind of an unrelated word whose definition doesn't really apply here. So C is incorrect. Obviously, answer choice B is correct then. We would say because a traditional response to the crisis, bolstering medical college enrollments, bolstering in that case meaning supporting those medical college enrollments or increasing them. So our answer there would be B. So the big tip that I want you to take away from this video is if you have two words or one word or a couple words underlined in the middle of a sentence or at the end of a sentence as in 24, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you're looking at your answer choices, and if you see that they're all different root words, like in this case for 24 and 25 they had all different root words, then what you want to make sure that you're doing then is taking a look at maintaining an academic tone, which most passages on the SAT writing section have an academic tone, so you want to maintain the tone of the passage, and then you also want to avoid using slang and avoid using casual words, and then also just make sure it's idiomatic, right? There are some questions, for example 25, it wasn't testing your ability to see if it was idiomatic, but part of 24 was. Okay, so just understand that that third thing you want to check for is just whether or not it's idiomatic, right? Would it flow naturally if we were to say it out loud? So hopefully that was helpful. Today I have an SAT writing tip that I want to share with you. So my SAT writing tip today deals with combining the underlined sentences. So on the SAT writing section, sometimes we get a question that will ask you which choice most effectively combines the underlined sentences. So what will happen is you'll have two sentences, both of them will be underlined, you have to connect them. So oftentimes what these questions deal with is repetition and redundancy. So a lot of times the two questions, there'll be ideas that are repeated across them or a subject that is repeated across them. And what you'll want to do is you want to get rid of unnecessary repetition and get rid of redundancy. So in these cases, what I'm going to do then, if I see I have a question where I'm asked to combine sentences, what I'll do is I'll read through my sentences in my passage, so that'll be right here. And then as I read through it, what I'm going to try to do is get rid of things that repeat and that are redundant. So that's what I'll go ahead and do. So I have, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion, period, oxygen depletion. Anytime that I see that I have a subject underlined, or I'm sorry, a subject at the end of my sentence, and then I have that same subject at the beginning of my sentence, what I'm always going to look to do is to get rid of that second subject, end with a comma instead of that period, and then what I want to do is include a who, which, or something like that to connect them. So in this case, I have oxygen depletion. Okay, that's not a person, so I can't use who, but what I can use is a comma and then say which. Okay, I can say oxygen depletion, which kills fish and other wildlife in the lakes. Now by doing that, I don't have to say oxygen depletion twice, so that gets rid of that repetition and redundancy. So now what I'll do is I'll take a look at A through D. Now, the thing is, if you want to find your answer choice, you're going to just have to read through them. But here's how you can do this to save time. Now, when you're asked to combine underlined sentences, obviously you want to be as efficient with your word choice as possible, or as concise as possible. Now, if you're trying to be concise, you're more likely to use less words. So what I do on the SAT writing section is if I'm reading through these answer choices, I don't read A through D. What I do is I read my shortest ones first. So I would read D first, I would read A second, I would read B third, and C fourth. Now keep in mind, if answer choice D, when I read it first, if it's perfect, I'm not going to read A through C until the end when I go back through and check my work after I've answered all my other questions, because otherwise I'm wasting time if I know D is going to be correct. So I'll go ahead and read through D. We have, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion, which kills fish and other wildlife in the lakes. Okay, that's as concise and efficient as possible. It's also grammatically correct. Now I want to cover a few things when we're asked to combine underlined sentences. There are a couple things you want to watch out for. Okay, one of those is modifiers. Okay, you want to watch out for the following. So I'm actually going to make a list for you right here. So I'm going to write watch out for, and then ... Okay, now keep in mind this is for questions where you're asked to combine underlined sentences. These are the things you want to watch out for. Okay, one of the things that you want to watch out for is modifiers. So a lot of times on when combining sentences like this, one of your sentences, it'll have a modifier that can be used to describe a subject. So for example, you could have a subject, let's say that your subject was Abraham Lincoln, right? Say Abraham Lincoln took the place of oxygen depletion here. It was ending one sentence and then it was starting the next, right? If it's ending one sentence and starting the next, Abraham Lincoln was, and let's say that the next sentence described Abraham Lincoln, we'd want to watch out for a modifier at the beginning of our sentence describing him. So remember that with modifiers, you have to have your modifying phrase or clause followed by a comma, and then you have to have who or what it is modifying directly after. So you want to watch out for something where you have a modifier and then you don't have something that it's modifying directly after, because you have to have what it's modifying directly after that comma, after that introductory modifier. So keep that in mind. You have to watch out for modifiers. The other thing that you have to do is make sure your sentence is obviously grammatically correct. Okay, you have to have a grammatically correct sentence. Okay, so that's another thing you need to look out for when combining sentences like this. Now, another thing that you need to do, and this one is pretty important, and it can kind of trick some people up. You want to make sure that you're progressing in a logical order. Okay, for example, if you have something that is a causal relationship between the two sentences, you want to make sure that whatever the cause is comes first. You want the cause to come first and the result or the effect of that cause to come second in the sentence. So you want to make sure that you're progressing through a logical order or a sequential order. If it's a causal relationship, you want to say what caused the next thing, right? So the cause first, effect second. So you want to make sure you're progressing in the logical order. So those are really the three big things that you need to watch out for when doing these combining sentences question. Now, a fourth thing, I already touched on this a bit when I went through that question, but was being concise, right? If you don't know what concise means, it means basically being efficient in your word choice or not being repetitive. You want to make sure you avoid repetition and avoid redundancy. And I want to quick show you something as far as repetition and redundancy, that let's say that you read through D and you weren't quite sure if it was your answer. You should be sure, but if you weren't, then let's say that you were going through A, B, and C. I want to show you how you know that those are going to be wrong real quick. So next we would go to 2. We would have, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion, the result being that it kills fish and other wildlife in the lakes. Saying the result being that that's very, very wordy. Okay, we don't want to be wordy when we're combining sentences like this. The other thing I see is that I have the pronoun it, right? If I'm going to use the word it, I know that that's referring to oxygen depletion, and that's kind of just like repeating the word oxygen depletion again, so I wouldn't want to do that. So it's wordy, it's not efficient in its word choice, it's not concise, it's repeating oxygen depletion by using this pronoun it, so A would be incorrect. Now B, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion. These algal blooms, okay, I'm repeating algal blooms twice. That's repetition. We want to avoid repetition at all costs. C, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion and oxygen depletion. Once again, we see we have repetition there. We don't want to repeat words like that. Next, we have D, in addition, right, we already talked about how that's the correct answer, so we already know that. Okay, so hopefully that helps you when you're combining sentences like that. The first step is going to be to read through the passage. Second step, try to get rid of anything that's repetitive. Try to kind of come up with your own answer choice first. Then what you're going to do is you're going to look at your answer choices A through D, and you're going to go through and you're going to read them in the order of shortest to longest. So you'd start with 1 in this case. You're going to number them off. Read your shortest one first. If your shortest one sounds like your correct answer, go ahead and select it and move on, and then come back and check your work after you've answered all the rest of the questions. But yeah, start with your shortest answer choice first when dealing with these combining sentences questions like that. And then, as always, make sure that you're avoiding repetition and redundancy in your answer choices, and you should be all set there. So watch out for modifiers, make sure it's grammatically correct, make sure it follows a logical order, make sure it's concise, and that should certainly help you with those combining sentences questions. So hopefully that was helpful. If it was, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and as always, have a good day. So the writing tips and tricks are now all done, and we're going to go ahead and transition into the reading section. So like I said, I'll be doing 3 passages, right around 30 minutes total. Obviously, I'm going to be following my recommended pacing strategy that I outlined here. So if you want to take about 30 seconds or so, or pause the video, refresh your memory on how I approach pacing for the reading section. As I go through the reading section, you'll pretty much see me handle the passages pretty much the same way that I would if I were taking the SAT. Only real difference is that I'm reading it out loud to you and explaining my thoughts and explaining my answer choices and things like that as I go through it. So I am providing verbal answer explanations, but that's pretty much the only difference in how I'll be handling it on the real SAT versus when I do these videos for you. In this case, when I'm doing a walkthrough like this. So with that, go ahead and take about the next 15 seconds, go ahead and brush over this, and then we're going to get started with the reading pacing from SAT Practice Test 2 reading sections. We got questions 1 through 10 are based on the following passage. The passage is adapted from Charlotte Bront. It's titled The Professor, originally published in 1857. No man likes to acknowledge that he has made a mistake in the choice of his profession, and every man worthy of name will row long against wind and tide before he allows himself to cry out, I am baffled, and submits to be floated passively back to land. From the first week of my residence in X, I felt my occupation irksome. The thing itself, the work of copying and translating business letters, was a dry and tedious task enough, but had that been all, I should have borne with the nuisance. I am not of an impatient nature, and influenced by the double desire of getting my living and justifying to myself and others the resolution I had taken to become a tradesman. I should have endured in silence the rust and cramp of my best faculties. I should not have whispered, even inwardly, that I longed for liberty. I should not have pent in every sigh by which my heart might have ventured into intimate its distress under the closeness, smoke, monotony, and joyless tumult of Big Ben close, and its painting desire for freer and fresher scenes. I should have set up the image of duty, the fetish of perseverance, in my small bedroom at Mrs. King's lodgings, and they too should have been my household gods, from which my darling, my cherished in secret, imagination, the tender and the mighty, should never, either by softness or strength, have severed me. But this was not all. The antipathy which had sprung up between myself and my employer, striking deeper root and spreading denser shade daily, excluding me from every glimpse of sunshine of life, and I began to feel like a plant growing in humid darkness out of the slimy walls of a well. Antipathy is the only word which can express the feeling Edward Crimsworth had for me, a feeling in which great measure involuntary and which was liable to be excited by every most trifling moment, look, or word of mine. My southern accent annoyed him, the degree of education evinced in my language irritated him, my punctuality, industry, and accuracy fixed his dislike and gave it the high flavor and poignant relish of envy. He feared that I too should one day become a successful tradesman. Had I been anything inferior to him, he would not have hated me so thoroughly, but I knew all that he knew, and what was worse, he suspected that I kept the padlock of silence on mental wealth in which he was no sharer. If he could have once placed me in a ridiculous or mortifying position, he would have forgiven me much, but I was guarded by three faculties: caution, tact, observation, and prying as was Edward's malignity. It could never baffle the lynx eyes of these, my natural sentinels. Day by day did his malice watch my tact, hoping it would sleep, and prepared to steal snake-like on its slumber. But tact, if it be genuine, never sleeps. I had received my first quarter's wages and was returning to my lodges, possessed heart and soul with the pleasant feeling that the master who had paid me grudged every penny of that hard-earned pittance. I had long ceased to regard Mr. Crimsworth as my brother. He was hard, grinding master. He wished to be an inexorable tyrant, that was all. Thoughts not varied but strong occupied my mind. Two voices spoke within me. Again and again they uttered the same monotonous phrases. One said, "William, your life is intolerable." The other said, "What can you do to alter it?" I walked fast, for it was a cold, frosty night in January. As I approached my lodgings, I turned from a general view of my affairs to the particular speculation as to whether my fire would be out. Looking towards the window of the sitting room, I saw no cheering red gleam. Okay, at this point, that was 3 minutes to read the passage. I'm going to go ahead and answer the questions. I'm just going to go in order here. So we have which choice best summarizes the passage? Well, if we think about the passage as a whole, we're talking about, in the beginning, a character and how he dislikes his job, and then as he goes on, he elaborates on the reasons why. So our answer there would be A, right? He talks about how his employer, Mr. Crimsworth, hates him. He talks about how the job is monotonous, and he talks about the reasons why he does not like this job. That's after he goes on describing it. He considers those reasons why. Okay, the main purpose of the opening sentence in the passage is to do what? Okay, well, when we open up in this passage, what I notice immediately is I notice that he talks about how he doesn't like his profession and that no man ever wants to admit that he chose the wrong profession. And he's talking about how he's baffled. He's talking about how the thing itself is long and boring and that it's a nuisance. He's talking about how he really doesn't like it, and it's giving us insight into how he's thinking. Okay, so the big part here is that it's showing us what he's thinking. Okay, it's not about a controversy, so A is wrong. B, providing context useful in understanding the narrator's emotional state. Absolutely, it's telling us that he's upset with that profession he's chosen, and it's offering that insight into his emotional state. C, offer a symbolic representation of Edward Crimsworth's plight. Absolutely not. D, contrast the narrator's good intentions with his malicious conduct. No. Okay, number 3. We've got, during the course of the first paragraph, the narrator's focus shifts from what? Okay, well, his focus initially is on the general idea of job satisfaction, as I see in C, right? We know in the beginning he's talking about the idea that isn't specific to him. He's just talking no man, right? He's not saying himself likes to acknowledge he chose the wrong profession. Every man worthy of name will go against the current before he cries out that he's baffled, right? Before he cries out, oh, this is the wrong profession. So he's starting out general, and then as he goes on, he starts talking about himself, right? We have I. Okay, we see that. We talk about how he should have longed for liberty, all of those things. So he's really talking about his specific case there. Okay, so we're going from generalization about job dissatisfaction to the specifics of his own situation there. So that would be why 3C has to be our answer. As far as A, recollection of past confidence, no, we don't do that. B, reflection on his expectations of life. It's not about life, it's more about his job. And then life as a tradesman to desire for another job. Never says he desires another job. And then D, evaluation of factors making him unhappy. He doesn't start out in that in paragraph 1. Okay, 4, the references to shade and darkness at the end of the first paragraph mainly have which effect? Well, if we think about, we'll go ahead and go there, obviously, because we're told to talk about the shade and darkness. We know that when we go to that in that first paragraph, let's go ahead and find where it's at. I'll put it in blue. So we've got shade and darkness. It's looking like it's towards the end here. Okay, we've got darkness right here, humid darkness out of the slimy walls. He feels like a plant growing in darkness. We see that we have shade, looks like right here. Okay, we have spreading denser shade. So he's really talking about darkness and showing that dismay he has for both this job as well, really as his place in life, his circumstances at home as well. Okay, so we're looking for something that is showing that sense of dismay, right? They evoke the characters or the narrator's sense of dismay. It's not sinister thoughts, it's not fears of confinement, and it's not longing for rest. Those are senses of dismay, darkness and dismay. Okay, the passage indicates that Edward Crimsworth's behavior was mainly caused by his what? Well, we know that it talks about how Mr. Crimsworth or Edward Crimsworth thinks that the narrator is superior to him, right? So it's jealousy of that narrator's superiority. Okay, I'll go ahead and quick show you where that is as well. We see that that's right here. We have it was liable at every moment. We have, let's see, I know that there's one spot where it clearly says that. Okay, right here, had I been anything inferior to him. Okay, so obviously then Edward Crimsworth thinks that he is superior, that the narrator is superior to him, thus showing us how D is correct for number 5. 6, the passage indicates that when the narrator began working for Edward Crimsworth, he viewed Crimsworth as a what? Okay, well we know at first he viewed Crimsworth as a brother, right? We see that it is right here. I long ceased to regard Crimsworth as my brother. So at first he regarded him as a brother. Now in this case it does not mean that he was actually genetically related. In this case we're talking about an ally, brother in that sense. So our answer there would be B. Not a perceptive judge, not a demanding mentor, not a harmless rival. Next up we've got question 7. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Well, that would be what I just highlighted. Okay, talking about him as a brother, we see that that is going to be in line 61 to 62. So I'm going to go down, find that. I see that's going to be D for number 7. Okay, now I got question 8. Question 8. At the end of the second paragraph, the comparisons of abstract qualities of lynx and a snake mainly have the effect of what? Okay, well, him talking about the lynx and the snake, those are both predators. So it's really showing that relationship between the two and that those are both predators, right? He's really coming after the narrator. Okay, so those two are adversaries. So we're going to look for an answer choice that shows them as being conflicting characters. We have conveying the ferocity of resolution. No. We need them to be conflicting characters, contrasting two hypothetical courses of action. No. Suggesting the likelihood of an altercation. We don't suggest an altercation will occur, but we are illustrating the nature of an adversarial or conflicting relationship. So our answer would be D for number 8. At this point, we have question number 9. The passage indicates that after a long day of work, the narrator sometimes found his living quarters to be what? Okay, treacherous would not be a good answer choice here, just right off the bat. Predictable, also not good. Intolerable, this would be a mistake because you'd be looking too much and looking too narrowly at the word intolerable. Correct answer here would be dreary. Okay, I'm asked for evidence, so I can go ahead and find that for you as well. Okay, that's going to be really where we start talking about, I'll go ahead and find it for you right here. We start talking about how we've got what can you do to alter it? Okay, so we got line 68. We have the other, what can you do to alter it? I walked fast, for it was a cold, frosty night in January. As I approached my lodgings, I turned from a general view of my affairs to the particular speculation as to whether my fire would be out. Looking towards the window of the sitting room, I saw no cheering red gleam. That's showing it's dreary, right? It's not a positive view that he has of his living conditions, right? He views it as dreary. So our answer for 10 then would be D. That supports that it's dreary. At this point now we have passage 2. So I'll switch back to my highlighter and get a read through on this. So we have this passage adopted from Lane King, Can Economics Be Ethical? Written in 2013 by Prospect Publishing. We have recent debates about the economy have rediscovered the question, is that right? Where right means more than just profits or efficiency. Some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. Others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility, but before we can label any market outcome as immoral or sneer at economists who try to put a price on being ethical, we need to be clear on what we are talking about. Okay, so that's telling me that we're focusing on what we're talking about, what's clear about ethical economics. There are different views on where ethics should apply when someone makes an economic decision. Consider Adam Smith, widely regarded as the modern founder of economics. He was a moral philosopher who believed sympathy for others was the basis for ethics. He would call it empathy nowadays, but one of his key insights in The Wealth of Nations was acting on this empathy could be counterproductive. He observed people becoming better off when they put their own empathy aside and interacted in a self-interested way. Smith justifies selfish behavior by the outcome. Whenever planners use cost-benefit analysis to justify a new railway line, or someone retrains to boost his or her earning power, or a shopper buys one to get one free, they are using the same approach, emphasizing with someone and seeking an outcome that makes the person as well off as possible, although the person they are emphasizing with may be themselves in the future. Instead of judging consequences, Aristotle said ethics was about having the right character. Displaying virtues like courage and honesty is a view put into practice whenever business leaders are chosen for their good character, but is it a hard philosophy to teach? Just how loyalty should you show to a manufacturer that keeps losing money? Show too little and you're agreed it is good corporate raider, too much and you're wasting money on unproductive capital. Aristotle thought that there was a golden mean between the two extremes and that finding it was a matter of fine judgment. But if ethics is about character, it's not clear what those characteristics should be. Okay, next up we have there is yet another approach. Instead of rooting ethics in character or the consequence of actions, we can focus on the actions themselves. From this perspective, some things are right, some wrong. We should buy fair trade goods. We shouldn't tell lies in advertisements. Ethics becomes a list of commandments, a catalog of do's and don'ts. When a finance official refuses to devalue a currency because they have promised not to, they're defining ethics in this way. According to this approach, devaluation can still be bad, even if it would make everybody better off. Many moral dilemmas arise when these three versions pull in different directions, but clashes are not inevitable. Take fair trade coffee that is sold with a certification that indicates the farmers and workers who produced it were paid a fair wage. For example, buying it might have good consequences, be virtuous, and also be the right thing to do in a flawed market. Common ground like this suggests that even without agreement on where ethics applies, ethical economics is still possible. Whenever we feel queasy about perfect competitive markets, the problem is often rooted in a phony conception of people. The model of a man on which classical economics is based, an entirely rational and selfish being, is a parody, as John Stuart Mill, the philosopher who pioneered the model, accepted. Most people, even economists now, accept that this economic man is a fiction. We behave like a herd. We fear losses more than we hope for gains, and rarely our brains can process all the relevant facts. These human quirks mean we can never make purely rational decisions. A new wave of behavioral economists, aided by neuroscientists, is trying to understand our psychology, both alone and in groups, so they can anticipate our decisions in the marketplace more accurately. But psychology can also help us understand why we react in disgust at economic injustice or accept a moral law as universal, which means that the relatively new science of human behavior might also define economics for us. Ethical economics would then emerge from one of the least likely places, economists themselves. Okay, at this point we got that done in about 3.5 minutes, which is perfectly fine as far as that read through goes. Now we can go ahead and get on to our questions. So question 1, the main purpose of the passage is to do what? Well, as we go through, what we're doing is we're evaluating the different types of ethical economics. So we're going to find an answer choice that says that. Option A says, consider an ethical dilemma posed by cost-benefit analysis. No. Describe a psychology study of ethical economic behavior. No. C, argue free market prohibits ethical economics. No. We are examining the ways of evaluating ethics of economics. We talked about mainly 3 different ways there. Number 12, we have in the passage, the author anticipates which of the following objections criticizing the ethics of free markets. Okay, the objection that we're predicting here is that people say free markets are ethical because they allow individuals to make those choices. Okay, our answer there is going to be D. We're asked for evidence, so I can also go ahead and find you that as well. Okay, we know up top, we pretty much said it right off the bat because we wanted to counter that argument right away. We say some argue that because free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. So our evidence for us addressing that counter argument would be lines 4 to 5. So let's see if we have that as a choice. I would imagine we do, and I see that we do. So our answer for 13 then would be A. At this point, we can go ahead and move on to 14, as used in line 6. Embraced most nearly means what? Well, let's go ahead and go to line 6, and we can figure out what embraced most nearly means. So let's go there. We have line 6, the word is embraced. Okay, I'll put it in green so it's easier to see. We have the word embraced. We got others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. Okay, in this case, embraced corporate social responsibility really means that they're accepting this ethical critique, and they are also embracing or being, I'm trying to think of what a good way to say this was. I'd say they're adopting corporate responsibility if that's an option. Let's see if that is an option. Okay, we have option B, readily adopted. Yes, they're taking on that corporate strategy. They're embracing it. They aren't lovingly holding it. That would be not a good way to say this. Eagerly hugging, absolutely not. Reluctantly used, it's not reluctant, so that's why that's wrong as well. So our answer for 14 then must be must be B. All right, at this point, we can go ahead and move on to question 15. The main purpose of the 5th paragraph, lines 45 to 56, is to do what? Well, let's go take a look. Okay, it said 45 to 56. We see that there is yet another approach. Okay, so we're talking about another approach to ethical economics. In this case, talking about our actions themselves. So that's really the purpose of that. It's explaining that next approach of ethical economics. Okay, so we're not developing a counter argument, so A is going to be incorrect there. We're not providing support for an idea about economics being about character. We're describing a third approach to defining ethical economics. We're not illustrating one's actions are the result of another person's character either. So our answer there is going to be C. All right, as used in line 58, clashes most nearly means what? Well, let's go take a look. Come up with our own answer choice first so that we are not swayed by the answer choices. So we have many moral dilemmas arise when these 3 versions pull in different directions, but clashes, okay, I'll put an arrow there so you can see it, are not inevitable. In this case, conflicts between the 2. All right, so I'm going to look for an answer choice that says something about conflicts between the 2. Okay, I see I have the word conflict, so that right there would be perfect. So my answer for 16 then would be A. We wouldn't say mismatches, collisions, or brawls because none of those mean conflicts between 2 clashing ideals. All right, now we have 17. Which choice best supports the author's claim that there is common ground shared by the different approaches to ethics described in the passage? Okay, we know that that's going to be where we talk about how, and I'll just go ahead and find it because it's going to be easier to show you that way. It's right around the middle part on our right here. Okay, we talk about how these clashes are not inevitable. Okay, so we were really just there. Okay, we talk about how these moral dilemmas arise. There's 3 different versions. They pull in different directions, but how these clashes are not inevitable. Okay, at that point, we'd start giving an example. Take fair trade coffee, right? The farmers and the producers are paid a fair wage, and at the same time, buying has good consequences, is virtuous, and is also the right way to act in a flawed market. So I'm going to look then for 59 to 64 as my evidence there, because that's providing an example of how all of those come together and it's morally correct there. So my answer there would be answer choice C, 59 to 64. Okay, because that's providing our example of how the approaches to ethics can all collide and result in one ethical decision that obeys all of those rules. Now we have 18. The main idea of the final paragraph is that what? Well, let's go take a look at the final paragraph and come up with what the main idea will be. That way we are supporting our answer. Do we have to provide evidence there? We do not. That's okay. So the main idea of the final paragraph is what? Well, let's go take a look. So we talk about the big conclusion here is that the relatively new science of human behavior might also define ethics for us. Ethical economists would then emerge from one of the least likely places, economists ourselves. Right? We talk about how no human makes purely rational decisions. So then we're talking about how economists are going to be, looks like the people who solve this problem of ethical economics themselves. So let's go ahead and find an answer choice that says that. We have option A, human quirks make it difficult to predict people's ethical decisions accurately. No. B, people universally react with disgust when faced with economic injustice. No. Option C, understanding human psychology may help to define ethics and economics. Yes, we talk about how they work with neuroscientists as well. Option D says economists themselves will be responsible for reforming the market. No, not themselves, because we talk about how there are human psychologists, right? I'll go back up and show you how we talk about how they are working with neuroscientists here. Okay, neuroscientists. We talk about how they are aided by neuroscientists. Okay, we're talking about how behavioral economists are the ones. Okay, not necessarily just economists, but behavioral economists working with neuroscientists, understanding psychology. Okay, so it's not just economists themselves there. That would be a misconception of that. So it's not going to be answer choice D. It's going to have to be answer choice C for number 18. Okay, at this point we got question 19. We've got we got data in the graph about per pound coffee profits in Tanzania most strongly support which of the following statements. Let's go take a look. So we have profits in Tanzania. Okay, I've got regular coffee. I see the profit, right? I've got the amount in US cents per pound. Regular coffee profits compared to fair trade coffee. So we see that fair trade coffee is significantly more profitable during all of those years than the regular coffee is. So we have fair trade coffee consistently earned greater profits than regular coffee earned. Absolutely, that's correct according to the data. We don't have to look at B, C, and D. 20, data in the graph indicated the greatest difference between per pound profits between fair trade coffee and regular coffee occurred during which period? At this point, we're just going to go ahead and take a look at the graph, find the difference, where that difference is greatest. I see that that's going to be from right here to right there. That's 2002 to 2004. So my answer there would be answer choice B. So at this point, we go ahead and move on to 21. So 21, data in the graph provides most direct support for which idea in the passage. Acting on empathy can be counterproductive. No. Ethical economics is defined by character. No. Ethical economics is still possible. Yes, right? We're talking about how ethical economics is still possible as shown by that graph because it supports that statement in lines, I believe it was 59 to 64, where we talk about how fair trade coffee is the ethical decision and all of the economic rules we discussed still would support that fair trade coffee. Okay, so our answer there would be C for 21. At this point, we go ahead and move on to passage 3. Okay, passage 3. We'll go ahead and it's a 2-passage one, so we're going to read the first passage, answer the questions on the first passage, then read the second passage, then answer the questions on the second passage, and then after that, we'll go ahead and answer the questions on both because that's the strategy I recommend and that's the strategy I use as well. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. We have passage 1 is adapted from Nicholas Carr, author Nicholas Carr. The web shatters focus, rewires brains. Copyright 2010 by Condé Nast. Okay, I see my second passage is from Steven Pinker, Mind Over Mass Media. That one's in the New York Times. Okay, but we're focusing on the first one, so we have rewires brains, right? Web shatters focus. Okay, passage 1, the mental consequences of our online info crunching are not universally bad. Certain cognitive skills are strengthened by our use of computers and the net. These tend to involve more primitive mental functions such as hand-eye coordination, reflex response, and the processing of visual cues. One much cited study of video game Video gaming revealed that after just 10 days of playing action games on computers, a group of young people had significantly boosted the speed with which they could shift their visual focus between various images and tasks. It's likely that web browsing also strengthens brain's functions related to fast-paced problem solving, particularly when it requires spotting patterns in a welter of data. A British study of the way women search for medical information online indicated that an experienced internet user can, at least in some cases, assess the trustworthiness and probable value of a web page in a matter of seconds. The more we practice surfing and scanning, the more adept our brains become at those tasks. But it would be a serious mistake not to look narrowly at such benefits and conclude that the web is making us smarter. In a science article published in early 2009, prominent developmental psychologist Patricia Greenfeld reviewed more than 40 studies of the effects of various types of media on intelligence and learning ability. She concluded that every medium develops some cognitive skills at the expense of others. Our growing use of the net and other screen-based technologies, she wrote, has led to the widespread and sophisticated development of visual spatial skills. But those gains go hand in hand with a weakening of our capacity for the kind of deep processing that underpins mindful knowledge acquisition, inductive analysis, critical thinking, imagination, and reflection. We know that the human brain is highly plastic. Neurons and synapses change as circumstances change. When we adapt to a new cultural phenomenon, including the use of a new medium, we end up with a different brain, says Michael Merzenich, pioneer of the field of neuroplasticity. That means our online habits continue to reverberate in the workings of our brain cells, even when we're not at a computer. We're exercising the neural circuits devoted to skimming and multitasking while ignoring those used for reading and deep thinking. Okay, the author of passage 1 indicates which of the following about the use of screen-based technologies. Well, we know that he's really talking about how screen-based technologies, right? In this case, it doesn't say main focus, so we just have to find which one's true here. As far as it should be thoroughly studied, he doesn't make that claim. It makes brains increasingly rigid. He doesn't make that claim. It has some positive effects. He does make that claim in passage 1. Not that it should be widely encouraged. He does not make that claim either. Which choice provides the best evidence? Okay, best evidence here, that's really going to be in the beginning where we talk about, looks like right here, right? We have certain cognitive skills are strengthened by our use of the computers and the net. So that's in lines 3 to 4. That's showing that there are positive effects there. So I'm going to look for something that says lines 3 to 4. If we have that, I see I do have that as an answer choice. So my answer then would be A for number 23. Next up, I've got question 24. The author of passage 1 indicates that becoming adept at using the internet can do what? Well, we know that in passage 1, he discusses how using the internet is going to make people's skills as far as processing information quicker, but at the same time, it's going to make our ability to think deeply and analyze things as far as a creative way. It's going to make that lessen, right? It's going to undermine that. So we're going to look for an answer choice that says one of those two things. We have option A, make people complacent about their health. No. B, undermine the ability to think deeply. We do make that claim. So our answer there would be B. Okay, not increase people's social contacts, not improve self-confidence. Our answer there would be B. That is the only claim that is supported by the text. As used in line 40, plastic means what? Well, let's go take a look at line 40 in the word plastic. So we know that the human brain is highly plastic. Neurons and synapses change as circumstances change. Okay, so we know in this case plastic is meaning that it is changeable or malleable. I'm looking at either of those as an answer choice. Creative would be an incorrect answer. Same with artificial. Same with malleable. That is correct, right? Malleable means changeable. So our answer there would be C. Sculptural, absolutely not. Okay, answer here is malleable or changeable. Okay, if you don't know what malleable means, basically just means it's changeable. So answer there for 25 would be C. At this point, we go and move on. We got 26. We see it refers to passage 2, so we go read passage 2. Critics of new media sometimes use science itself to press their case, citing research that shows how experience can change the brain, but cognitive neuroscientists roll their eyes at such talk. Yes, every time we learn a fact or skill, the writing of the brain changes, or the wiring of the brain changes. It's not as if the information is stored in the pancreas, but the existence of neuroplasticity does not mean the brain is a blob of clay pounded into shape by experience. Experience does not revamp the basic information processing capacities of the brain. Speed reading programs have long claimed to do just that, but the verdict was rendered by Woody Allen after he read Leo Tolstoy's famously long War and Peace in one sitting. It was about Russia. Genuine multitasking, too, has been exposed as a myth, not just by laboratory studies, but by the familiar sight of an SUV undulating between lanes as the driver cuts deals on his cell phone. Moreover, the effects of experience are highly specific to experience themselves. If you train people to do one thing, recognize shapes, solve math, find hidden words, they get better at doing that thing, but almost nothing else. Music doesn't make you better at math. Conjugating Latin doesn't make you more logical. Brain training games don't make you smarter. Accomplished people don't bulk up their brains with intellectual calisthenics. They immerse themselves in their fields. Novelists read lots of novels. Scientists read lots of science. The effect of consuming electronic media are likely to be far more limited than the panic implies. Media critics write as if the brain takes on the qualities of whatever it consumes, the informational equivalent of you are what you eat. As with ancient people who have believed eating fierce animals made them fierce, they assume watching quick cuts and rock videos turns your mental life into quick cuts, or reading bullet points and online posting turns your brain into bullet points and online postings. this point, we answer questions on passage 2. Passage 2 refers to the novel War and Peace by Woody Allen to suggest what? That he didn't like his writing style? Absolutely not. That's incorrect. Could not comprehend the novel by speed reading it. Yes, right? We talked about how Woody Allen said it was about Russia. Obviously, it's about a lot more than Russia. Obviously, it's showing he cannot comprehend that entire novel, War and Peace, in one sitting by speed reading it. Okay, so our answer there would be answer choice B. At this point, we go ahead and move on. We got question 27. According to the author of passage 2, what do novelists and scientists have in common? Okay, we talk about how they immerse themselves in their fields. Okay, that's pretty much a direct quote. They immerse themselves in their fields, so it's not about taking risks. It's not about them being eager to improve their minds. It's not about them being curious about other subjects. Okay, it is about them becoming absorbed in their fields, right? We talk about that. That's pretty much a direct quote of them really immersing themselves in those fields, right? So our answer there would be D for 27. At this point, we move on to 28. We have the analogy in the final sentence of passage 2 has primarily which effect? Well, if we were going to take a look at that, let's go and take a look at the analogy in passage 2. It says it's at the end. Okay, I highlighted that here. We have, as with ancient animals, eating fierce animals makes them fierce. People think that watching quick cuts and rock videos or reading bullet points makes it so your brain can only process those things. Okay, what that's doing is that's criticizing that other group that makes those statements. So criticizing those other people who are maybe neuroscientists or whoever that are making those statements. Where you're really being critical of a particular group, that group that's making those statements. Okay, we're not alluding to the past to evoke a nostalgic response. We're not employing humor. Okay, to soften the severe opinion of human behavior, and we're not using ornate language to illustrate a difficult concept either. We are criticizing that view of that particular group who advocates that sort of approach where you are what you eat, that you are what you eat approach. Okay, at this point we got 29. The main purpose of the passage is to do what? Okay, in this case, each passage, obviously, so we're referring to both passages. Both passages, what are they doing? Well, in this case, both passages, they're making their own argument or making their own case on this subject. Okay, so they're not comparing brain function in those who play games on the internet and those who browse it. Okay, that would be way off topic. That's not even close to the correct answer. B, reporting on the problem-solving skills of individuals with varying levels of internet experience. We don't talk about varying levels of internet experience. Taking position on increasing financial support. We don't talk about increasing financial support for studies. And then making an argument about the effects of electronic media use on the brain. Yes, that's correct. Both passages make that case there. So now we got question 30. We see we're talking about the relationship between the two passages. What's best describing that relationship between the two? Okay, well, what do we know about passage 1? We know that passage 1 is taking a stance that is contrasted or criticized by passage 2. We know passage 2 really comes at the author of passage 1 saying your conclusions are incorrect. So we're going to look for an answer choice that says that. Passage 2 relates to the first-hand experiences that contrast with the clinical approach in passage 1. No, we don't really have clinical approach in passage 1, so that's wrong. Passage 2 critiques or criticizes the conclusion drawn from the research in passage 1. Yes, okay, we're going straight at that author of passage 1. Passage 2 is saying, nope, you're wrong, you're completely wrong, here's why. Okay, so our answer there would be B. Option C, passage 2 takes a high-level view of a result that passage 1 examines in depth. No. Passage 2 predicts the negative reactions that the findings discussed in passage 1 might produce. We're not predicting any negative reactions. Our answer is B for number 30. At this point, we got question 31. Which of the following points would the authors of both passages most likely agree? Okay, so we got pretty much, we just have to go through here. Okay, there's not really any way to predict this one. So as we go through, we'll just find what one both the authors would agree. Computer savvy children tend to demonstrate better hand-eye coordination than do their parents. Okay, no, we don't talk about the relationship between kids and their parents here and how that deals with computer savviness. Option B, those who criticize consumers of electronic media tend to overreact in their criticism. We don't talk about the level of their overreaction or underreaction, so that's incorrect. C, improved visual spatial skills do not generalize to improved skills in other areas. Yes, both of them say that doing one thing does not improve your ability to do another. So our answer there would be C for number 31. At this point now we've got question 32. Which choice provides the best evidence that the author of passage 2 would agree to some extent with the claim attributed to Michael Merzinch in lines 41 to 43 of passage 1? Best evidence the author of passage 2 would agree to some extent with that claim. So we got to go find that claim real quick. So that's 41 to 43. So let's go take a look at that. We see that it is when we adapt to a new cultural phenomenon, including the use of a new medium, we end up with a different brain. Okay, obviously passage 2 would agree with that. Okay, in this case, we're asked for the evidence. I remember that we say the word, I believe that we say the word yes when we talk about him saying yes, obviously it changes. So it looks like that was 54. I see I have it highlighted yes every time we learn a factor skill, the wiring of the brain changes. So he's saying obviously he would agree with that there. So our answer there would be 54 to 56. Okay, so our answer there is going to be B for number 32. At this point, we go ahead and move on. We got our next passage. So hopefully that was helpful. Obviously, if I were to include a whole pacing walkthrough, then at the end I'd have some time left. So what I'd do with my time left is if I had skipped any answer choices, those are the first thing that I'd go back and I'd do. I'd go find the correct answer to any questions I'd skipped. After that, I'd go find any questions I was unsure of, find the correct answer to those. After that, I would go through, match my bubble sheet to my test booklet, and then at that point, I just start checking as many questions as I possibly can. Okay, and as far as the priority for checking questions, it would really just be checking as many questions as I can. So some questions that you can check really quickly are going to be the words and context questions. So I might go check those since I know I can check a lot of them. So that's one method you can use. Another method is if you struggle with a passage more than another, you can go back and work through the questions in that passage. That way you're making sure that you're attacking those problems that you're more likely to possibly get wrong. So pretty much there's a lot of judgment in how you spend the time checking as many questions as you can. I can pretty much leave that up to you. Obviously, you want to answer or check as many as you can, and also check the ones that you're more likely to get wrong than those ones that you're very confident in. So with that, hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Tomorrow's video is actually scheduled to be a practice test day. So what that means is that you're going to be taking a practice test. It'll be SAT practice test 9. So tomorrow you're going to take that. I will have right around probably 5 minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of a video there just before you take that practice test, where I just want to point out a few things as far as how to simulate realistic test conditions and things like that. So make sure you watch that 5-minute video before you take SAT practice test 9. And then on day 11 of 14, then your responsibility is going to be reviewing that practice test. So you can go ahead and take it on day 10, and then if you want, you can wait to score it until day 11. That's fine. Or you can score it on day 10. But then day 11 is going to be set aside as a review day for that practice test to make sure you can get the most out of it. So I'll talk about how the best way, in my opinion, to review your practice test is on day 11 in that video. That video will probably be right around anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes as well. And then I'll give you the rest of that time to go through and review your practice test so you can get the most out of it. So that's what day 10 and day 11 are going to look like. So hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Any private SAT tutoring I'm doing, or any private college admissions consulting I'm doing, college essay proofreading and writing that I'm doing will be linked in the description as well. There's also a donation link, so if you would like to donate to me, the link will be in the description as well. I appreciate any donations. Make sure to spread the word about this course. I think it's really useful for people. And as always, make sure to have a great day. Thank you for watching.